going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling, and we are catching up with the world of pro wrestling and sports entertainment. There's a lot that's gone on, but not too much since I've last done a video. Took a bit of a break from the wrestling world, but a couple things came up. Of course, we had AEW Dynamite this past week. The show, actually, I watched the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks have been a lot better than the shows before it. A lot of momentum, again, coming out of the last pay-per-view, which was an excellent pay-per-view. Of course, that Iron Man match with MJF and Bryan Danielson. But on this show, we got to see a lot of little things, little nods as far as the future of AEW, and them kind of getting something exciting going on again, something that's going, first and foremost is MJF coming to the ring, having his bar mitzvah. I'm not Jewish, so I'm going to get it wrong. But his bar mitzvah, which you really can't do until you're like way old, apparently. I think even Taz mentioned that, or Shivani mentioned that, or Excalibur. But he had it to celebrate his big win over Bryan Danielson. And then we get Jungle Boy coming out. And then as soon as Sammy Guevara came out, I think a lot of us keyed in onto the, they're going to do the Four Pillars storyline. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, since the early days of AEW, it was established that the Four Pillars, which essentially are the future of, speaking of pillars, you should go check out my Blood Omen Legacy of Kane and the Pillars of Nosgoth Let's Play on my gaming channel. But the pillars of AEW are the four men, and some people will substitute a woman in there. We'll talk about that in a second, as the four pillars that AEW will be built upon, and that's MJF, Sammy Guevara, Darby Allin, and Jungle Boy Jack Perry, which I like that dynamic of the four of them because they're so different. And this is the first time, even though we've seen them paired up in matches here and there, I don't think we've seen Darby and Jungle Boy yet. I may be wrong about that. But MJF makes mention, of course, he's beaten all three of these other guys. And they all now want to challenge for his championship. And a promo that was very well done, and a promo that was very well planned. Darby Allin had probably the most poignant thing to say in his promo.
Entire company is you got grown-ass wrestlers in the back going on Twitter. I'm not upset. I want out of my contract if I don't get what I want. Includes you, our world champion, with his all bidding war of 2024 crap. Max, AEW means a whole lot more to me than it ever did you. That is exactly why I should be world champion. And you know what I'm gonna do if you don't give me a championship match, right? You know what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna go complain about it on Twitter.
Where he mocked a lot of the guys who've been whining, complaining over the last 6 to 9 months about AEW and wanting to out of their contract and pouting and staying home and moping and groping and wanting it all to be about themselves and not what's best for the wrestling industry and what's best for AEW. And, you know, there's two sides to think on that. You should try to get the best you can for yourself. But I think with AEW, and this may be a different video, but a video topic, but with AEW, I think what Darby said is very right. AEW has a much lower margin of error than WWE. WWE can be bad for 9 years, as we've seen. Some people say it's been even longer, until like the last year or two where they finally got things kind of moving, and now you're watching the show and like, storylines make sense. They're exciting. I like the characters. The matches are good. WWE didn't have that for a very long time with a big chunk of the wrestling industry, but now that they've got that, and AEW is also kind of simultaneously, and it's weird how this happens sometimes. One company will go up in creativity, and the creative gets better, and then the other company that was really high with creative is like this sharp decline. It's really interesting how they've gone in opposite directions on that. But AEW has been suffering from a bit of malaise over the last several months. A lot of people are going to point back to the whole thing with CM Punk and the Elite Brawl Out. Some people point back to the Cody thing. Him leaving was the first start of this about a year ago. But whatever it is, there has been AEW is not as on fire as it was in its first 3 years. What I saw on this Dynamite felt more like what AEW felt like in the beginning, which was like, what if WCW Monday Nitro had been good and had been around for the last 20-some years? What would it look like? It would look like AEW Dynamite, essentially. I feel they did a good job with setting up this rivalry. Now, what kind of 4-way match we're going to get from this? Hopefully, maybe at a Battle of the Belts, or maybe on a big Rampage if they're trying to up the ratings for that, or just on Dynamite to get the ratings up for Dynamite, which have been under 900,000 the last couple weeks. Whatever that is, I'm looking forward to it. It's something fresh and exciting, which has been missing in AEW for a while. We also have at the end of the show kind of a subtle reunion of Hangman Page with the Elite, as they kind of came in and provided backup for Hangman when he was facing off with the Blackpool Combat Club, which at the end of the show, again, kind of like an old Nitro, there's everybody and everywhere coming into the ring and fighting. You got 5 different factions fighting at the same time. And a match that already involved 3 big factions when the House of Black was defending the newly won Trios Championships against the former champions, the Elite, and the Jericho Appreciation Society. And it was also a homecoming for the big Winnipeg boys, Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho, and Don Callis. But Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho having their big homecoming show. And it's the first time I think Kenny Omega has performed, and I think they said this, he's performed in front of a hometown crowd that big, because a lot of the big stuff he did in his career that he's famous for was over in Japan. So he never had like a homecoming match. And even when they were doing Ring of Honor, they didn't go to Canada that much. So this is kind of a cool thing for Kenny Omega. And obviously it's kind of old hat for Chris Jericho, who also got some award or whatever from the city. But overall, I think this was a really, really good AEW Dynamite. I really enjoyed it a lot. Except for the QT Marshall segment. They keep trying to make QT work, and QT, I'm sure he's a great guy, and you've heard nothing but good things about him, but I don't, some people just are not, I want to say some people just aren't good for television, but I think QT, they haven't found really where he should be as a character on a wrestling show yet. I don't know what that is. I don't know if this is it. I've seen kind of a mixed reaction to it online. Some people are fine with it, but some people who really don't like it. So who knows? But Will Hobbs being the new TNT champion, TNT champion is really good. And we also got Valkyrie, speaking of the TV titles, the TBS champion. It had a little bit of a more of that Lucha Underground influence for me coming in with Valkyrie, I think wife or girlfriend, I can't remember if they're married or not, of Johnny Wrestling, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Nitro. That was pretty cool to see Jade getting somebody who can match with her, because outside of Chris Statlander, there's really nobody else on the AEW roster who can physically match not only Jade's size but her athleticism. There's some bigger ladies in the division, and there's some more athletic ladies in the division, but Jade's that whole package, and Valkyrie's kind of close to that. So we'll see what happens in the end. But again, overall, I think AEW is going in a good direction. Now, you wouldn't know it from looking at, which I did yesterday, as I was like, let me go back and see what my fellow YouTubers in the wrestling space are doing after having not looked at it for a while. And boy, so there was a news story about AEW Talent Unhappy, which is basically like some story about Jon Moxley was supposed to do an indie show that had been booked for a long time, and AEW, Jeff Jarrett had started up the house shows, and he had to be at the house show instead of going to the indie show, and Moxley was upset about it. And now it's like big news, Mox upset with AEW, and he's gonna jump back to WWE, and clickbait. I don't know, man. Again, I've said, you guys who've been watching my channel for a while, I've said this for a long time. The wrestling industry will destroy itself. The wrestling community will destroy what it loves. It's always good at destroying what it loves. And the thing to do right now is we need to pile on AEW because they're on a downturn. And I'm just like, be careful what you wish for, because look, if AEW winds up failing, which other news reports we're going to talk about seems like they're not failing all that much, but if AEW does fail and it goes away and we're back to WWE, I mean, for wrestling fans like myself, that's bad. But I think for a lot of the people that you hear talking and see talking about this stuff, and they've kind of been on both sides of the revolution or whatever, a lot of them are really WWE fans. They grew up with only WWE. It's weird for them. I think for them it was kind of cool to have they weren't old enough to experience the Monday Night War, so AEW came along and they're like, oh, this is kind of cool. But ultimately, and this is kind of the thing I always worried about, ultimately, a lot of these people are a lot of the ones you see are just WWE fans. And yeah, it was cool to kind of have we tried to do a version of the Monday Night War. It wasn't quite the same thing because really we won't allow it to be the same thing. I mean, I don't think Tony Khan could do anything else to have a rival company to WWE than what he has done. You have a billionaire, you have TV connections, you had a group of guys, core guys who started the company that were extremely hot and had a grassroots swell of support and were gaining tens to hundreds of thousands of fans behind them. You had this kind of very ingrained, very well-trained, very well-established characters from all across the international wrestling scene, guys from Mexico and Japan and all of the other wrestling companies in the United States who a lot of the WWE fans wouldn't want to look at because the production quality wasn't, a multi-billion-dollar production set, and there weren't enough people in the arena, so I can't watch it because I'm a wrestling fan of WWE. I can't be associated with any wrestling company that has less than 1,000 people. But that's really what the wrestling community is, I do think. I mean, I hope for a little bit better, but seeing how things are going right now, I'm not too optimistic that we aren't going to go right back to where we were. And I think a lot of people who are wrestling fans right now probably will. I think that's bad for the wrestling industry because I don't see it growing. I don't see a lot of younger people taking an interest in it. WWE's trying to do that with Logan Paul, but even he's kind of a little bit of he's more millennial than Gen Zer, and I don't hear it. I don't see it amongst the really young people who are really into wrestling the way, young people in my generation were into wrestling. We were into all kinds of wrestling. And I don't think the interest to venture outside of the WWE bubble is there. And plus, Triple H is now taking over. So now WWE's fine, and we don't have to watch all this other shit again. Now we can just go back to watching WWE. I'm sure it's going to last forever, and we're never going to need AEW. And if AEW and New Japan, and they all stop running shows and stop getting ratings, and just WWE, I'm sure that's going to be fantastic. But AEW does need to get its content up, and I think that, I think they get a little bit of a bad rap. I think it's not as good as it was the first 3 years, and the heat is definitely gone from it, but I don't think their shows are terrible by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, their last pay-per-view was fire. That pay-per-view was really, really good. I think some of the bigness of it, the bigness is kind of wearing off in AEW a little bit, so they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of get that big time feeling back to their company. But apparently Time Warner and Discovery is not upset with it because there are rumors going around that AEW is going to get yet another hour of television on TBS and TNT, along with the Access show that they're debuting in a couple weeks. But they're also going to get apparently another hour of wrestling. Now, whether or not this is going to fill the 6:05 slot on the weekends, which is probably the best time for it, is Saturday afternoon, which I don't think is a really bad time for wrestling, a weekly wrestling show. I would kind of like, if they're going to do that, though, I would kind of like them to take Rampage and just make Rampage a 2-hour show on Saturdays. But apparently they're doing something else. Not quite sure what that is, but that is the scuttlebutt that AEW will be getting yet another hour of television. So despite what's going on, I don't think we have to worry so much then about, if this is true, about the contract negotiations for their TV deal, because if they're greenlighting not only one but 2 new AEW shows, I don't think they're going to have to. I don't think we as fans, and you're going to hear this in the community, I don't think there's anything to worry about AEW staying on TBS and TNT for the foreseeable future. So, good news for AEW on that front. Now they just have to kind of, and what Darby Allin kind of was alluding to, they need to kind of get that spirit back of being the rebels and being the outsiders. But noting the fact that a lot of wrestling fans are outsiders, and you kind of gotta counteract that desire to be, the front runner chasers. Kind of appeal to wrestling fans as being outsiders, because here's the honest thing about us as wrestling fans, and when I'm considering myself as part of the wrestling community, I definitely feel it way more in this community than other things that I'm interested in. We're definitely outsiders. The outside world rejects us very much for liking this stuff if we're over the age of 12. So it's not supposed to be what we're supposed to be doing. But wrestling is so much more than what they think it is. It's so much more than what WWE thinks it is. And hopefully we'll see a lot more wrestling. I always say I would love if wrestling was much more like other entertainment industries where we had different genres of wrestling. And I've said this 1,000 times, but it's worth repeating if somebody's new and never seen me before. My personal view is wrestling should be more like the movie industry, where you have horror films and blockbuster films and comic book films and period piece films and kind of more psychological dramas and more comedies, slapstick comedy kind of stuff. I would like that. I like WWE can be the big Marvel. They can be the big super Disney studio. But, Paramount's still releasing some good shit. The 20th Century Fox or whatever, Spotlight or whatever. There are other, Universal. There are other major movie companies that put out big league movies. It's not just Marvel and Disney. So that's what I would want for the same thing with the music industry and everything else. I want that for the wrestling industry. It'd be nice if we could have multiple big time companies, and pro wrestling was an attraction and not just one company. But that's just little me with my vision and what I think might be a lot healthier for the wrestling industry than the way that it is now. But off my soapbox, I want to see what you guys think about this. Get on your soapbox. Let your voice be heard down in the comment box below. Do you think AEW is getting on a good track? Do you think these ratings numbers are a worry? Do you think that there is just a concerted effort now? It's in vogue now to kind of crap all over the company. Do you think they're crapping on AEW as hard as people do and kind of spinning up all of these? Oh, Moxley's upset with AEW. Maybe he's going to leave. All that kind of weird stuff is a little bit silly. Or do you think, hey, WWE got it for years. Time for AEW to take it on the chin for a year or two, too. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. And until next time, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and commentary. I will be catching you guys up with the New Japan Cup, by the way, later this weekend. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a good day.